Breaking news here on SportsCenter. We have the new AP poll top 25. Florida State out, Notre Dame moves up. Of course, no surprise there. The Seminoles tumble from number 10 to completely out of the poll after losses to Georgia Tech and last night to Boston College. The Irish moved into the top 5 after a road win over Texas A&M, and Oregon fell from 3 to 7 after a closer than expected win over Idaho. Let's say hello now to Dan Orlovsky, and you're looking at that top 10. Obviously, this is breaking news just coming in. What's your reaction?
It's good to see Notre Dame in the top 5. I think that win, just in control of the football game down at Texas A&M, spoke volumes. Texas and Michigan play this weekend, so one of those two top 10 teams is probably going to bounce out of there unless it's an unbelievably close game and Michigan finds a way to win it. Also, you don't see it here, but 12 and 13, I believe, are Miami and USC. That coming off the weekend was going to be the most interesting thing for me was, did Miami or USC, with two huge wins and Miami's being more dominant than USC's, did either of them find their way into the top 10, but sitting at 12 and 13? I agree with a lot of this. I do think one of those two teams is likely out after this weekend.
What about Florida State completely out of the top 25?
Unfortunately for Florida State, tough start.
Yeah, really tough start, especially having to go to Ireland and back. Okay, let's move to what's happening this upcoming weekend as we go to the Big 12 here, because Colorado took down North Dakota State in week 1. Now they'll reemerge as a Big 12 member, facing off against a former Big 12 school in Nebraska. Here's Deion Sanders on what is ahead.
That has a lot to do with the quarterback and getting the ball out of there and understand what's coming, what the defense presents, and checking us and putting us in the right situation. It has a lot to do with that as well. Oftentimes it may look like the line, but sometimes it's not the line. It's something that we did wrong. You attack weaknesses. I don't know if you attack inexperience. If that's a weakness, so be it. But the kid made some darn good throws, some pretty good plays. They did some consistent things that we knew they would do within their offense. Phenomenal game. I mean, it started out, back and forth a little bit, but they went ahead and did what they needed to do. But I love what he showed in his first college game ever. I love what he showed.
So Deion Sanders is referring to Dylan Raiola, who you can see there. And our own Dan Orlovsky also referring to Raiola going up against Shedeur Sanders this week. Be a fun college football to watch. Two top pick 5 quarterbacks go at each other. I think he means top 5 quarterbacks going to be picked. We know what he means. We'll let him explain. Dan Orlovsky back in studio with us now. And so obviously we have a great quarterback matchup. Let's start with the Colorado side of things in Shedeur Sanders. Pretty
spectacular player. I mean, he kind of burst onto the scene nationally last year, and then he doesn't hesitate to, in week 1, just be spectacular. And I think the thing, when you hear Prime talk about really good understanding of what that throw is absolutely spectacular. When you freeze frame that image right there and you ask, well, who's he throwing to? The answer is, I have absolutely no idea, because everyone's covered. And I think you see the superpower of Shedeur is his ability to throw the ball to spaces that guys are going to, that it doesn't make sense because there's no one there for the ball to go to. And he's just got this really good understanding. I think when you hear Coach Prime say that, of understanding what the defense is trying to throw at you, and Nebraska's going to try to throw a ton of different looks at Shedeur, but when you have the lens of elite quarterback play and all the traits that are needed to throw the ball to spaces that aren't there and it's throwing guys open, I think he's the guy doing it at the highest level in college football right now.
Okay, that's a bold statement in itself, the highest level. But he's had a lot of hype, right? Like we've talked about him for the Heisman and whatnot. On the other side this coming weekend, Dylan Raiola is the quarterback for Nebraska. Not as much hype, although you say there should be. Look at him and Patrick Mahomes have a little similar.
Yeah, you don't know which one's which.
Yeah, a little similar thing going on here. And you actually played with Dylan's dad.
Yeah, I've known Dylan since he came out of the womb. His dad was a all-pro center in Detroit. And so Dylan, we've known Dylan for a long time. You could tell he was going to be a special athlete from a very early age. His dad sent me, probably 4 or 5 years ago, sent me video of him playing baseball. And I responded back to his dad and said, wow. And then he sent me football. And I said, he's going to be a top 10 pick in either sport. And I think you saw a little of the element early on last week. And I understand it's UTEP. I understand it's his first collegiate start. He's uniquely wired character-wise to handle the situation. He's got tremendous physical talent to make some of the throws that, again, there's not a ton of people on the planet that are going to attempt then, let alone be able to pull them off. And so Shedeur absolutely has the upper hand in this week's matchup. This young man is going to has the chance to carve out a name for himself on the national stage, and I will bank on him doing it. He is a unique talent when it comes to that position.
Can I push back for a minute? I mean, you in your tweet said these two quarterbacks, Shedeur and Dillon, might go top 5 in the NFL draft. I don't even know that those two schools have combined for 5 wins over the last year. I mean, they have to equate to W's on the field as well. You still have that
I think
much
Nebraska
confidence.
is going to be really good. I do. In Dylan Raiola's time, I think Colorado is going to be a much improved football team when it comes to, at the end result, wins and losses. The number 1 pick of this year's NFL draft, Caleb Williams, I think won 5 games last year at USC. So wins certainly matter, but the NFL at that position always drafts on traits more so than wins and losses.
Hey, this is good for the Big 12. These are 2 former Big 12 teams coming back together now, back in the Big 12. Nebraska and Colorado can't wait. Dan Orlovsky, thank you so much.
Smash them boys down in Tallahassee, man. Smash them boys.
Who knew the nicest man, Damien Woody, had a little bit of an evil laugh? He wasn't the only former Eagle excited, though, for his alma mater last night. Matty Ryan tweeted on X he enjoyed his Monday night with his kids because they were in bed by 8:27 after that lead. Former BC running back A.J. Dillon weighed in. Zay Flowers commented, then boys came to play. Hashtag Go Eagles. A lot of excitement, but there is still a small, slight chance for one Florida State Seminole. Their chances to make the college football playoff have now plummeted from 35%, which was where it was at in the preseason, to 1% to make the 12-team field after an 0-2 start.
No, 2 points here, Greeny. 1, they can get in if they win the ACC. 2, they're not going to win the ACC if they continue to play like this. Okay, let's just establish that. They were beaten soundly up front on both sides of the ball. They can't run the ball, they can't stop the run, and their quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, has been erratic at best. So in the 12-team college football playoff, if you're fighting for an at-large bid, that's not a college football playoff team. The selection committee will know that. People might not like the fact that you can have a conference champion with multiple losses. Let me say that again. You can have a conference champion with multiple losses guaranteed to have a spot in the college football playoff. So if miraculously Mike Norvell fixes this and somehow they go on to win the ACC, they're in the playoff.
Heather detailing how there might be a chance for Florida State as we say hello to college football analyst Greg McElroy, who joins us here on SportsCenter. Now, Florida State lost by double digits. Their offense, as Heather just pointed out, couldn't get into any rhythm. The defense couldn't stop the run. It was a disaster. Afterward, Mike Norvell was apologizing to everyone, saying he's so sorry for what everyone just witnessed. However, when you break down the Seminoles, how can they fix it?
Well, it's not an easy fix unless free agency were implemented during the season, and that's not the case, not yet at least. But I look at it, and I think they have to establish an identity of what they want to be offensively. First and foremost, DJ Uiagalelei is not a guy that over the course of his career is going to be able to just drop back and carve teams up with passing efficiency. He's a guy that really made huge strides at Clemson in his second year as a starter, and then last year at Oregon State as a guy that's going to work primarily off play action. They have to be able to create play action, but more than anything else, their defense needs to step up, man. The strength of their team coming into the season was supposedly the defensive line. That has not been the case in the first 2 games. Now, you got to give immense credit to both Boston College and Georgia Tech, but when your strengths are playing like weaknesses, that's a really difficult hill to climb. So hopefully the guys that are likely going to still be NFL players that are along that defensive line, hopefully they come together and play with more effort and play with a little bit more intensity, because if they don't and they continue to get run on the way they did the last 2 weeks, it's going to be a real challenge for them.
Yeah, and it's going to be a really long season also for Florida State. They were 10 in the country last night entering the game against Boston College. Obviously, that is not the case anymore. This is new on SportsCenter just this afternoon, the brand new AP poll. Here's a look at the top 10. The Noles out of the poll altogether after losing their first 2 games of the season. Notre Dame and Missouri, meanwhile, made the biggest moves within the top 10. The Irish up 2 spots to 5, and the Tigers going from 11 to 9 and jumping over Michigan in the process. And so, Greg McElroy, what is your biggest takeaway from that new AP poll?
Well, it's probably the reaction that the college football world has had to Miami and USC. Miami's not really all that unexpected. You look at their roster, what they had on paper coming into the season. They started at 19. I know I was screaming from the rooftop saying this is a team that is painfully underrated. Just because you don't trust them doesn't mean they shouldn't be ranked higher based on the personnel they have at several difference-making positions. And then USC moving all the way up from 23. I would not have had them in the preseason poll. I really wouldn't. Now, after the performance that we got from Lincoln Riley's team in week 1 against LSU, I come away feeling great about what I saw from the Trojans. A group that looks to be more capable on the defensive side, not just in the back end, but also in the front seven. They had multiple situations in which they held LSU in check along the lines of scrimmage, an area that has long been a headache for Lincoln Riley's group. So you know, too, that offensively, they're still going to be able to score. They're going to be able to score points because they have great weapons at wide receiver, and I love what I saw from their first-time starter in the regular season, Miller Moss, who's filling the massive shoes of first overall pick Caleb Williams. So I think the moves from Miami and USC are actually very appropriate and not a significant overreaction to big week 1 victories.
Yeah, USC was so impressive on both sides of the ball, Greg, as you said. Now that last game of the regular season matchup, when they welcome Notre Dame to town, will be really interesting if things stay on this same trajectory. Biggest game of the schedule, though, this upcoming weekend is when Michigan and Texas face off against one another. Game day is going to be on hand there in Ann Arbor. And so when you look at these two teams and what's in front of us, what are you looking at?
Well, I can't wait to watch this game. It's a game that a lot of us thought might be the national championship matchup last year, based on how these teams were playing at the end of the year. And they match up really well. These are two teams that are really built from the inside out. Now, the big thing is that last year's version of both Michigan and Texas were really all about the line of scrimmage. Well, the line of scrimmage this year for both teams still very good. There's a few absences. But I think this game might be a game that's won on the perimeter. I look at Texas's wide receivers from a year ago. All 3 are gone. And I look at Michigan's defensive backs, which I think is an elite unit. You have some relative inexperience at Texas. They've all played a lot. They're all transferring in from Power 5 schools, but they haven't played a lot together. They looked really good in week 1 against Colorado State. Now you're going against one of the best secondaries in the sport, led by future first-round pick at corner, Will Johnson. How will Steve Sarkisian find favorable matchups against that back end? So I think this was a game, had they played it last year, would have been decided along the line of scrimmage. This year, though, if it goes Texas's way, it's probably going to be decided on the perimeter, which is where they want it with their athleticism at wide receiver.
This is a huge matchup. Texas is the first top 5 non-conference opponent to visit Michigan since 1991. Derek Jeter's going to be there. Matthew McConaughey's going to be there. It's going to be a star-studded event. Greg McElroy, thank you for the insight as always, buddy.
I might turn a little, I like working loud.